Screen share. Okay. Hi,
Hi,
everyone.
hi everyone. This is I'm Kathy Rowe from New Jersey Advocates for Aging Well, and also I help run the Age Friendly New Jersey Alliance. And very happy to have Tim Evans and Helen Kiyokis from New Jersey Future today. Um, I've got to say, Tim and Helen, I'm always amazed at the work you do, how just practical and common sense and meaningful it is. And whenever I see whatever you're up to, it makes so much sense to me. So we're here today to learn more about the Great Neighborhoods and Homes for All initiative and the just really insightful work that you're doing. So I'm just going to turn it all over to you. This is being recorded, by the way, so if you come late, you'll have access to the recording later. And we can also share other information at the end as well. Please try to hold your questions to the end so we can make sure that we get through them all. And with that, I am turning it over to Helen and Tim.
Hi, everyone. So before I do a screen share, I just want to say thank you, Kathy, for inviting us. Thank you for that introduction. And thank you to everyone who's joining for spending your afternoon with us. So I always take longer than I should to share the different screens. So if you can hang tight for a few seconds. Um, All right, you can,
Perfect.
okay. And let me just do one more thing on my end. Okay, so ready to get started? Right? Okay, great. So I'm Helen Kiyokis. I'm the policy manager for land use at New Jersey Future, and Tim Evans is our research director. I also have two other colleagues who are joining, listening in. Um, Sun Yang is our Great Homes and Neighborhoods for All program manager, and Eva Sumano will be working as our local campaign coordinator. And both of them just started last month. So we've finally been able to fundraise and build capacity to advance the comprehensive agenda that I'll go over shortly. So Eva and Senyang are newer to the team, but are available to ask questions, and I have all of our contact information on the last slide. So this is a presentation on Great Homes and Neighborhoods for All, but before we jump into the initiative and the different campaigns that we're operating under the initiative, I also want to just quickly share a little bit about New Jersey Future and why a smart growth land use organization cares about creating age-friendly communities. So we New Jersey Future is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization working on building sustainable, thriving communities across New Jersey by promoting smart and equitable growth, redevelopment, strategic infrastructure investments, and transportation choices beyond cars. And we do this by engaging in conducting original research, developing public policies, engaging in advocacy and coalition building, and providing hands-on strategic and technical assistance to municipalities. So as a land use organization, we examine the relationship between the built environment and aging and believe that a community that's friendly for older adults is a community that's friendly for everyone. So Tim Evans, our director of research, has really done a lot of analysis in at this intersection, and we've concluded that the land use characteristics that make a place great for older adults are the same smart growth features that we advocate for in all communities, and that's compactness and density. So putting a high number of destinations closer together to facilitate walking and biking and reducing the number of miles you have to travel if you do need to drive. A mix of uses, so putting different types of buildings and destinations closer together. Think like housing, employment, shopping, healthcare, all of the things that we access on a regular basis to meet our basic needs, our social needs, and to improve our access to those things. Next is street network connectivity, because a grid-like well-connected network is also what makes it easier for us to reach various destinations, and it enhances walkability. And then finally, access to public transportation to reduce car dependency. So Tim, I'm going to kick it to you periodically. So go ahead. I know you raised your hand very properly.
Yeah, I didn't know what's the best way for me to chime in. I know there's a couple places where it's going to be natural for you to throw it to me, but I thought this would be a good place to give a shout out to the Taub Foundation, who fund our aging friendly work. Back in 2013, they approached me about this issue of people attempting to age in places that weren't really designed for that, for people that can't drive everywhere. And so I had to think about what makes a place aging friendly, and maybe to no one's surprise among the people who were involved, I realized that the characteristics, the built environment characteristics that I was imagining make a place good for aging in place are for that you can still live independently and not have to worry about driving everywhere. And that's where we really realized, well, it's the same smart growth principles that we talk about in our other work, but if you make things friendlier for older people who can't drive everywhere anymore, you're going to make things better for anyone who doesn't want to have to drive, regardless of how old they are. Um, and I say this wasn't really a surprise because the executive director of the Tao Foundation, I see Julia's in the audience, Julia's boss, Barbara Lyons, used to be the ED of New Jersey Future, and she's the one that hired me. So it's maybe like some symbiosis there that we arrived at this. And I really have to thank the Taub Foundation for forcing me to come up with these smart growth indicators to try to quantify who's doing a good job of this, because I've gone on to use these indicators for everything else. So it gave me an excuse to try to operationalize what we think of as smart growth, the compactness, mix of uses, and street network connectivity. I have used those over and over again since then. I don't know that I would have had the excuse to come up with them if it hadn't been for the original Creating Places to Age project. So shout out to the Town Foundation for giving us a tool that I've gone on to use for many other things.
Thanks, Tim. Yes, I echo that gratitude. So as Tim stated, New Jersey Future, we are thinking about how do we plan and build in a way that meets the needs of not just older adults, but also all New Jersey residents. And right now, I think most of you are aware, regardless of where you're joining us from, your professional backgrounds, personal backgrounds. I think we all know that we're kind of in a bit of a crisis right now, and there are just too many barriers standing in the way, and too many residents not able to afford to live in a community that meets their needs. I'm going to, again, before jumping into Great Homes and Neighborhoods for All, just share a little bit more about the supply, just take a little bit of a closer look at the current state of housing production and affordability in New Jersey. So New Jersey is just not producing as much housing as it used to. And we can draw this conclusion by evaluating certificate of occupancy data, which is another project that Tim has undertaken. So these certificates are issued at the end of the construction process when buildings are complete and ready for occupancy. So the average up until the recession was, a little under 30,000 a year. And since the recession, and it continues. I know it's up to 2022, but we do have the 2023 and I think 24 data, and I think it's still about the same, under 15,000 on average. So like almost half fewer homes being built than prior to the recession. So there was a huge decline, and it never got back to those pre-recession levels. So the National Low Income Housing Coalition, this is one of their estimates that New Jersey has a shortage of 205,000 affordable rental homes for New Jersey residents with extremely low income. But then even of the rental properties that do exist, we are 20% higher than the national average in terms of the cost, how much rent is. I checked this point last night. So I had a similar data point in a June presentation, and the median home sale price, I think then was like 508,000. So it just continues to rise. So as of the source I checked last night, we are now the seventh highest state when it comes to median home sale price, averaging $561,000. And then finally, if we look at cost burden, a household is considered cost burdened if it spends at least 30% of its gross income on housing costs. And in New Jersey, 36% of households overall are cost burdened. But when you unpack that statistic, it's 29% for homeowners, 48% for renters. If you further unpack that for renters age 65 and older are 60% of those renters are considered cost burdened. And Black and Hispanic renters are disproportionately impacted, and that percentage is actually higher. These are just data points on supply and affordability. Tim has also worked on additional points, and we continue to be, despite our diversity, we continue to be a highly segregated state. And also New Jersey ranks first in the country of the percentage of 18 to 34-year-olds still living with their parents. So it's 43% in New Jersey, and the national rate is 32%. So that also indicates that we have a housing problem in New Jersey. Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, two things I wanted to add here. The underproduction is a national phenomenon, not just New Jersey. And I mean, a lot of people ascribe it to restrictive zoning inhibiting supply, but I don't know what the macro forces are that underlie this happening all across the country. You can look at the exceptions that tend to be places that make it easy to build housing, but it seems like New Jersey is not unique in having these barriers. And in some ways, the rest of the New York City metro area is even worse than New Jersey is. So this is a national phenomenon. I think we'd probably have to talk to housing economists to really explain what some of the macro reasons are. Um, and then the other point I wanted to make about the shortage of rental homes, we should acknowledge that that's almost certainly an underestimate, and it's because that's really hard to measure. When people try to quantify how many additional units we need, they're really kind of stuck with looking at the characteristics of people that are still living in New Jersey, but what you're missing are people who have given up and moved elsewhere because they couldn't afford to stay here. And no one asks that. There's no question on the American Community Survey that asks, why did you move? To give people the opportunity to say, I left because I couldn't afford to stay there. So that's where you have to get creative and look at other statistics that point to that happening. And one of those is the number of young adults still living with their parents. The fact that New Jersey has the highest rate in the country, to me, that's a warning sign. And but that doesn't get counted as the number of units we need. We don't count people who are 30 years old and still living with their folks as needing an additional housing unit, even though they probably do. So take those estimates as most likely being underestimates of the true scope of the problem.
Thanks, Tim. Julia?
I don't want to interrupt. If you'd rather have questions at the
I
end, we
think
can.
you're the only one we're going to allow to interrupt.
Just another point to add to Tim's. There are other kinds of data and filters and ways of looking at this as well, such as people who are in sort of higher level of care than they need to be in, like in nursing homes, that would move into the community if there was a place that they could move into with supportive housing. So we've had a couple of landscape analysis studies done on that as well that I can share with you later, Tim. But I just thought I would note that that's another factor that's probably not considered.
Right. Thanks. So we have two supply issues happening in New Jersey, right? We have housing is too unaffordable because first, there are just not enough homes to rent or buy that meets people's needs and budgets, and not having enough homes to rent or buy creates competition. Competition drives up prices. But the other supply issue is that we're not allowing for the construction of the right types of housing that we need. So there's a major lack of diversity in what is allowed to be built. And addressing affordability and increasing opportunities for choice requires us to diversify our housing stock. So another table from Tim Evans here is a look at housing types in New Jersey. In the last few decades, most of the homes that exist are single-family detached homes. But in half of the state's municipalities, so we have 564 municipalities, in 280 of them, single-family detached homes make up at least 70% of the
She
total.
stepped away. She should be back.
And the issue here is we can't have housing diversity if the majority of our land is zoned only for single-family detached housing. These are the most expensive types of homes that exist. And New Jersey is also a small state, right? Geographically, we're the most densely populated state, but we're physically small. So it's also not a sustainable development pattern to only be zoning for these types of homes. What's missing is what's here in the middle, which we call missing middle. It also is what constitutes what we call like our starter home housing stock. So that's, again, it's not just that we're not building enough, it's also that we're not building the right types of housing that are more naturally occurring affordable housing. So not when we think of affordable housing, we think about in New Jersey, the Mount Laurel Doctrine and housing that's available to people of certain income levels, but smaller home types, townhomes, duplexes, having housing diversity will result in having more naturally occurring housing. Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, I think this was the last place where I saw it made sense for me to interject. To add a little bit of additional context, this chart here, which I really like,
Tim made this chart. Tim, you made it.
Yeah, it's expressed in terms of percent. So, I mean, in one sense, it's a zero-sum game because you have to add up to 100%. So if the percentage of one type goes up, something else necessarily has to go down. But look at that set of bars for the 2 to 4 units. It's not it's not just the percent of the stock made up of units that are in buildings with 2 to 4 units in the structure. Not just the percent went down, the actual number of such units actually decreased from 1950 to the present. So it's not just a matter of they're a shrinking share of the total. They're actually fewer of them today than there were 70 years ago. And that doesn't necessarily get conveyed by this chart, but the missing middle is becoming even more missing.
Okay, thanks. And then the last slide with numbers are population projections. So I think if you're joining the Age-Friendly New Jersey presentation, you're probably aware of this. The 65 plus population is grown each year in absolute terms and in the share of the total population. And on the right with the blue bars, we see that the number of older adults increased from about 1.1 million in 2000 to more than 1.5 million in 2020. That's a 38% increase. And this growth tracks with what we're seeing nationally. So if New Jersey's projections continue to track with national projections, then almost 1 in 4 residents will be 65 plus by 2050. So I know that was a lot of data and information, but to recap, there's a lot going on, and complex problems require comprehensive solutions. And that is why we, New Jersey Future, is serving as the backbone staff convening the Great Homes and Neighborhoods for All initiative, but it is a, to now describe, I might also just be saying GHNA, so Great Homes and Neighborhoods for All. So the GHNA initiative is a statewide pro-housing initiative grounded in the belief that everyone in New Jersey should be able to afford an affordable home in a safe, vibrant neighborhood, one where schools, healthy food, jobs are all conveniently within reach with less driving, with peace of mind, knowing that you're not going to be displaced because of climate change or rising costs, with parks and green spaces easily accessible, and where schools, neighborhoods, and activities are high quality, safe, and inclusive. We publicly launched Great Homes and Neighborhoods for All in November 2024. So the website went live. It's only been about a year, but that was after another year, a year-long stakeholder engagement process, where a lot of different people came together, work groups were convened, and they identified barriers, all the different barriers standing in the way of us achieving Great Homes and Neighborhoods for All and developing ideas for solutions. So then the work groups then came back together and presented a comprehensive action agenda focused on reforms that shape the built environment and protect residents from displacement. And the ultimate goal is systems level change. And the approach is we are building a collaborative pro-housing movement to achieve systems changes by advocating for state level policy changes, more support for local planning, and developing a network of local pro-housing campaigns. So the steering committee has developed 6 principles under which all of the various work is bucketed. So I'm going to review the principles, and then I'm going to focus on the last one. Government efficiency. The government reforms should streamline development reviews, revamp incentive programs, and make processes fair, faster, and cost-effective. We know this is one of Governor Sherrill's priorities, so we're excited to dive deeper into advancing this work. Local planning, local land use planning for housing should meet public needs and reflect the public's interests. Local campaigns should have the tools and resources to support residents and municipal officials advocating for affordable homes in great neighborhoods. New housing production and programs that preserve existing homes should ensure that an ample supply of low-cost quality homes in every community are produced, and that there are homeownership opportunities, especially for first-generation buyers. Residents should be better protected from displacement due to growing hazards and rising costs or other related factors. And zoning reforms. So zoning regulations should allow for compact, mixed-income homes in inclusive, climate-safe, and walkable neighborhoods. So this last principle, the zoning reforms, is actually over the last year since we publicly launched, has been the bucket, the principle that we have spent most of our time focused on. And why zoning? So zoning is used to control how land is developed and used, and determining what type of housing can be built where determines who gets to live there. So I've heard it described as an invisible barrier around neighborhoods. There are a lot of negative side effects to zoning. A lot of the factors that have brought us to our current supply and affordability crisis comes from decades of restrictive zoning that blocks new housing and drives up costs. Zoning has also become a proxy for racial segregation. So we don't have banks creating redlined maps anymore, but we do have local zoning ordinances that are basically engaging in similar processes, and whether intentionally or unintentionally are creating these exclusive practices that prevent people from moving into neighborhoods they would like to live in. Zoning also forces more land to be dedicated to cars. And because we're never going to get rid of zoning, we're not going to abolish it altogether. But another reason we are focused on advancing policy priorities related to zoning reform is because if you can see how carved up New Jersey is, we have 564 municipalities, which means we have 564 bodies that are charged with overseeing their own town zoning codes. And we will never, ever see all 564 of these municipalities agree to the same changes. So what we think we need to do is pass state level laws that preempt some local control, which is home rule is is very real in New Jersey, but we think that the state should take actions that require municipalities to adopt certain ordinances for us to be able to break through the current barriers. There's also national momentum. 2025, there was record number of housing reforms passed across the country. As Tim mentioned earlier, what's happening in New Jersey is not unique to New Jersey, but other states are taking actions and we're not. So we're getting a little bit left behind. Some examples of what other states have done: accessory dwelling units, legalizing duplexes and triplexes. So basically eliminating single family zones in certain areas, reducing parking minimum requirements, lot size requirements, which are zoning codes that say in order to build a house, you have to, I'm exaggerating, but you have to build on 1 acre of land. So reducing the size of that lot, and a lot of other different things. So many ideas. So the ideas exist. We know what's working nationally, so we don't have to. We have a lot of good examples to work from. And our priority bills for Great Homes and Neighborhoods for All under our zoning reform campaign is the ADU bill to allow the construction of accessory dwelling units, which would offer housing solutions for aging family members, adult children with disabilities, or young adults just starting a career. There's another bill that would allow for the conversion of vacant commercial properties to housing. We call it the Stranded Assets Bill. So I think everyone can think about that strip mall or office building that's now just sitting empty, and there are a lot of opportunities there. So it could increase the availability of homes near jobs and also revitalize blighted areas. There's another bill related to parking, and that's because we have certain parking requirements. And we think that the developer should be able to determine how much parking they actually need rather than being bound to these certain minimums, which might be more than they need, right? So reducing those parking minimums will, rather than having to pay for land that's going to sit empty and never have cars parked on it, we can build more homes on that land, and it'll preserve green space and also reduce emissions. And the last priority bill has to do with New Jersey's Transit Village program, which offers more incentives for denser transit-oriented development. That's housing near public transit stops, and it'll create vibrant transit neighborhoods. So Tim, I see your hand up again.
Yes, I wanted to reinforce your point about New Jersey not keeping up. The session that I got put in charge of organizing for the Planning and Redevelopment Conference 2 years ago highlighted what some other states were doing. I had people from Montana, Oregon, Washington, Virginia talking about some of the steps they were taking to increase the supply and the diversity of housing, some of which Helen mentions here. In the intervening 2 years, New Jersey has done none of these things. So it's not like we don't know what some of the strategies are, we're just not doing them.
Right. And we launched our zoning campaign. It was like May, June, so it's only been we've only been up and running with this campaign for a few months, and because none of the bills passed in the last session, they've all been refiled, and we are continuing the advocacy work there. I wanted to just do a quick spotlight on accessory dwelling units because I think that's the one that a lot of folks on this meeting might be most interested in. So the bill did move through committees. There were 3 different bills. They got combined into one. There were some issues that we had issues with, some items that were added to the ADU bill. Because the bills were refiled, those changes went away basically and reverted back to the original versions of the bill. But I just want to highlight how they did change the bill, and we're hoping that won't happen again. So one was that they made an amendment that you could only construct one of these if it would be used for a personal purpose, and that meant a non-rent paying guest or a family member. We know a lot of people want to build ADUs for these reasons, for an aging parent, or someone who, their adult child who they won't be making pay rent. But we felt that that was too restrictive and doesn't account for what happens then when, let's say, I build an ADU for my mom. When she's no longer with us anymore, then I'm just stuck with an empty unit and I can never rent it out because, so there's just things like that we didn't think they were thought through. There was also a density exemption. There was amended language that if your municipality has 9,000 or more residents per square mile, you don't have to allow for ADUs, and that ended up carving out 39 municipalities. We understood the intent behind that because there is concern in some of the urban areas, denser areas, that are also experiencing a lot of LLC ownership, that it would incentivize more single family homes being bought up by institutional investors and then creating ADUs. So basically a way for people to make more profit off of our housing crisis. So we understand the intent, but we think that there are other ways we could address those concerns. And then the law didn't have, the proposed law didn't have any enforcement mechanism or opportunity for public recourse if an ordinance were passed, but an ADU application were denied. There was no process outlined with what that person could do, like basically an appeal process. So that's what happened with the ADU bill. But again, it's been refiled with the new bill number, and we will continue to advocate for that. So I'm almost finished with slides and then we'll open it up. So I highlighted zoning reform, but I'm just going to go over quickly the priorities under the other 5 principles. For government efficiency, again, to streamline the review process, to update and improve required trainings and provide state support for local planning, to over the next year, try to seed and or support 3 to 5 local pro-housing campaigns, because so much of zoning, while we're advocating for state level changes, so all of zoning happens at the municipal level. So we need advocates in their own communities speaking up for smart growth and for more housing. For housing production, we need to make sure that we protect New Jersey's Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and that the money in that pot is not diverted to other budgetary needs. And then for tenant protections, Tim worked on a report that we published before the new year on how to identify displacement risk beyond eviction. So not only advocating for a statewide right to counsel legislation for folks who are facing eviction, which would just level the playing field between the landlords and tenants, but also to start examining what leads up to certain types of displacement and to think through local policy recommendations. So that's something we're working on now. And how you can take action, we'll have all of these links available. So we have an email list. I think that's the best way to keep up to date, is to subscribe to the GHNA email list. We also created a story bank, and stories are so important and impactful. And if you have tried to build an ADU, if you have built one, you know what it has been able to provide for you and your family. If you're not able to downsize, any housing story because again, this is a comprehensive agenda, so we're not looking for one specific type of housing story, but any housing story that you're willing to share, and you can let us know that you don't want your name shared, but that we can share your story. Any short story you're able to share will really, really help us in our advocacy efforts, because data, changing hearts and minds happens with real stories and not with these like numbers that don't really, we can't put a face to some of these data points. If you are here joining on behalf of an organization, you can endorse our 6 principles. We have a form where you can basically, like, it's not a pledge form, but basically say like, yes, I agree with these 6 principles. I support the GHNA agenda. And at the same time, again, if you're in an organization that develops policy priorities, encourage you to track these bills. If you sign up and we have action alerts, responding to those, contacting your legislators. Also, you can, at the local level, you can get involved with your local planning board, find out what's being discussed at your city council meeting. If they're talking about, I don't know if anybody here is in one of the municipalities that continues to sue over their Mount Laurel affordable housing obligation. We have several municipalities that are still holding out, hoping that the courts will tell them they don't have to build anything. So you can get involved at the local level and let your elected officials know that you disagree with what they're doing. And then start a local campaign sounds really daunting, but it's not that you have to be the one to start it. If you're interested in finding out if there are other folks in your community who would like to come together and do this local level advocacy, you can send us an email, and we're keeping a list of folks. And also, if you subscribe to our email, there is a little text box there, so you can add a little note to us when you sign up for an email that I might be interested in learning more about local campaigns, so you can send that note. So I'm going to take the slides down. Here's the last slide, is if you want to get directly to our GHNA website. We have social media pages that are only a few months old, so we are building our following there if you're on social media, and that is my and my colleagues' contact information. So I'll just keep this up for a few more seconds, and then I'll stop sharing.
Thank you, Helen. I think one of the most important points that you and Tim and NJ Future always makes is that, we're, those of us on the call today, we are working mostly with age-friendly communities, but what is good for an aging population is good for everyone. And that's a message just over and over that we have to echo. I gave a presentation this morning to a group on an aging council, and they were grilling me. I wish we had this first. They were grilling me on ADUs, how to bring them to their town, how to overcome local planning boards and opposition. And I just thought, wow, you guys are on it. So I'm going to
Right. And
share this recording with them. But it's, I think it's just a message that we have to keep hammering away at. This isn't us versus them. This is what works for everyone.
it's it it's going to require changes at all levels of government. So if we can't pass a statewide ADU bill over the next year, then can we have more municipalities, more people speaking up in their municipalities and getting local ordinances passed? We have about a dozen right now cities in New Jersey that do allow it. Otherwise, you can't do it. You have to go, it's a very, very lengthy, costly process to go and try and get the permissions from your town.
Mhm.
And you have to front load all of that money and all that time, and you don't even know if you'll be approved or not. So there's I think the slide that I showed with what's happening across the country, there are 13 states that have passed a law at the state level saying all municipalities need to allow for ADUs within certain criteria, right? No one can just, you can't build a high rise on your side yard, but there's still guardrails in place, but they should allow for it.
Yeah. Any other questions?
I had a question. If going back to the graph that showed the lack of middle housing, the missing middle, um, so it looked like in the 1950s that there was more of an allowance for multifamily or multi-unit housing than there is now. Is that what, did I take away the right data and information on that? And if so, is that because zoning laws changed or they were more in favor of multi-unit housing in the 50s than they are now? What do we need to change about that?
Tim, do you have a historical recollection?
You're talking about the 2 to 4 unit buildings,
Yes.
right, Julia?
Yes.
Yeah, I think if you look at where they are in New
Uh-huh.
Jersey, they're almost all in places that predate zoning.
Ah,
That was
okay.
just like what people built. People built twins and the
Hmm.
3 levels like one on top of another back before anyone thought to restrict what you could build.
Okay. That makes sense.
I think in a lot of the places where you find them, I'll bet you wouldn't be able to build more of them today because they've gotten on the zoning bandwagon and said, all right,
Yes.
well, you're grandfathered in if you have one of these, but we're not letting you build any more of them.
Okay. Got it.
I remember way back a few years ago, kind of early when a lot of the age-friendly groups here on this call were getting started. ARP brought out someone from Opticos Design in California to talk about the missing middle and the potential for ADUs. And they had said, like, this is what works in northern New Jersey in particular. And I thought, like, never heard of this. And they said, you have them all over. And just like you're saying, Tim, they were there already. They were grandfathered, but nobody thought of it. And then they started. I was actually driving around with somebody from Opticos and putting, there's one, there's one, there's one. And we do have them already. We didn't label them ADUs. They have been there for 50, 70, whatever years, but they're there and they work.
And I should have given credit. The image on the slide was from the AARP. They have a guide on ADUs, but also by allowing for them, basically by legalizing them, because a lot of these are being constructed illegally, right? There are a lot of un uh, uh, registered like basement apartments and other types of housing, and that's dangerous, right?
Yeah.
When things are being built without the proper inspections and registrations and permitting. So legalizing them will actually allow people to, I guess, in a sense, come out of the shadows with their units. Katie?
Yeah, I just had a question actually about like how does getting an ADU approved work? And is that like through the municipality? And if so, are there people through NJ Futures that I could guide people to that could help them walk through that process with their municipality or supports or something to read or yeah.
Yeah, it is through the municipality. And even if our priority bill gets passed, it'll continue to
Mm.
be through the municipality. So it won't change that process. It's just the state law is basically a mandate to municipalities to allow for these types of units. So people have to prepare their project plan and go before their board to request approval to do this because the planning board sets out like the master plan of your municipality, and then the zoning board is there to hear variances. So like if you're trying to use your property in a way that it's not zoned for, you have to go and get permission to do so. And there are some towns, I know Kathy referred someone, I think through the age-friendly Google group, sent a message that they immediately upon calling um, their local city office were told, you can't do this. So this person reached out to Kathy. Kathy connected them to me, and I didn't have that much more advice other than you should contact the land use attorney because so this person was told, like, we're not even going to give you the opportunity to present your plan and request the variance from the zoning board. We don't allow it.
Mm.
So it depends on a few things. If you're in one of the I think it's 12. You're in one of the 12 towns that allow ADUs like Princeton, Montclair, Plainfield most recently, I think. Then there's an ordinance in place that outlines how you go about that process and what you like the size restrictions and the parameters. But if you're in a municipality that does not have an ADU ordinance, it really is municipality specific. It could be even be like personality specific. Like, do you have a a body that's willing to hear your case and review your project or
Mhm.
not? So it's very there's no like one good answer on what you should do. But I
Yeah.
think the first thing to do is to check if your town has an ADU ordinance.
Okay. And I just had a follow-up question, which was in regards to y'all talking about those like illegally developed units. Is there something that can be done at like, I guess, a state or municipal level that if people have already developed these, that we can kind of get them from like developed to then actually legal? Because they exist, as you said, but like I feel like even if somebody lives in a community now that accepts ADUs, they might not want to go and be like, hey, I actually have this unit and I want to get it legalized. Is there some kind of steps that can be taken with that?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And I don't know if Tim, maybe Tim has been at New Jersey Future for 25 years.
Since
Yeah.
99.
So it's a much 25 years, 24 years longer than I have. So that is making me think that like in the ADU legislation itself, I don't believe there was any kind of language about like how to bring existing units into legal status. So that's a really good flag. Tim, I don't know if you have a different response for that question.
No, and in fact, the point I was going to make is that it's really hard to find out where these things exist
hmm,
and who allows them and who doesn't. Because I asked around about this. I asked some of our builder friends a couple months ago, and they don't know of any kind of central repository where someone's keeping track of which municipalities allow them. And last semester, we got an offer from a class at Princeton on artificial intelligence. Did we have questions that we would like them to try to answer for us? And I proposed that. I said, can AI go and search and look at the 564 municipal zoning codes and tell us how many of them allow ADUs? And they said, no, that's too complicated for AI to do. So the fears of AI taking people's jobs might be somewhat overstated if they couldn't handle that question. I'm not worried about my job, for example, but that would be really that would be a good use of AI if they could figure out how to get it to do it, is to give us a list of towns that allow them. And another frustrating thing is that the Census Bureau doesn't ask that question either, and they're not a standard housing type, so that there's no way to go and look up in the American Community Survey which towns have ADUs, because there are different types of ADUs, which are different types of housing units. So there's definitely a lack of information out there about where these things already exist. So if anybody knows of a data source, I'm all ears.
Yeah. Yeah, I think with our like most vulnerable communities, these spaces already exist in which landlords are providing technically illegal spaces, but I always try to see, okay, well, how can we then bring them to the table, right? They're not going to come to the table and say, yes, I have this unit and get fined, etc. But if there's like a pathway to like making them like accessible and actually like legal dwellings, maybe that's something to consider since, as we said, we know they exist. We just don't have a list of where they exist, and how they could possibly be worked into this plan of like increasing greater amount of housing and affordable conditions and better conditions, safe, better conditions for people to live in. But thank you so much. Sorry for taking
Thank
some
you.
time.
No, thanks for bringing that up.
Mhm.
Any other questions? Okay, could we just do a show of hands? Do people on the call know if their town allows ADUs? If you could either thumbs up or something so we can just get an idea. I should have asked that in the beginning. And if so, put in the chat what town it is. Looks like we have a long way to go. I know it's Maplewood, South Orange, Montclair, Plainfield, Princeton are the largest ones.
Princeton has the most permissive one.
Yeah.
Asbury Park has one.
Okay.
Newark does as well.
Oh, well, okay. I put in the chat, we had an ARP Community Challenge grant last year, and we did a housing design competition and had some really great submissions for ADUs, and Tim was part of the judging panel for that. And we're also going to have a panel at our conference on May 8th, a panel talking about ADUs as a housing solution. So we'll be sending you all more information on that. But there aren't any other questions, we can wrap this up. I really appreciate you joining us. And Helen and Tim, always good to see you. Thank you. I'll send out the recording and information plus all the links that you had put into. Oh, and somebody said Passaic City has an ADU ordinance. Thank you for that. So again, thanks everybody for joining us, and we will see you again soon.
Yeah, thanks for joining. Bye.